Hi, Richa. Welcome to Writersmelon. Welcome to Author's Corner. I'm really excited to talk to you today after I have gone through some of your books. And many congratulations on your latest book, The Curse of Kuldhara, right?
Yes.
So tell us
Thank you so
about
much,
this new
Priyanka.
book.
Firstly, I'll always, every time I'm speaking with someone in Writer's Melon, I always have an extra smile on my face because I remember when I was starting out and I had no idea that I need to be on social media. And writing isn't just about writing and sitting in a corner and expecting people to buy their books. I was just understanding the whole, landscape. And incidentally, Writer's Melon was the first, handle I saw and I interacted. There used to be these chats every Tuesday or Wednesday. There used to be these authors' corners and all of that. So a lot of my groundwork was done with the Writer's Melon, and I met some people through it as well. So I always have a soft corner for
I'm very
what you've
glad to hear
created.
that. Yes, I'm very glad to hear that. Yes, Writers Melon also it has been like over 10 years of managing and building up this community. And for me, it's always been about my love for books and chatting with authors. So, like you said, Author's Corner, we are constantly reinventing the different ways in which we can engage with authors and spread the joy of reading. Because honestly, that's like my go-to thing to keep my sanity intact, which is basically good
Absolutely.
books.
Mine as well.
And what is better than to have a good dose of fiction, right? And that's why I am like really fascinated by uh, the authors who are able to kind of build these parallel world and create these imagination and
Spin yarns.
so your book actually reminded me of some of those little world that we sometimes see in movies, and also the feel of these local detectives, like let's say Feluda, or I don't know what has been your inspiration. So, without me guessing it, why don't you tell us about your latest book, The Curse of Kuldhara, and how it came about, and also this whole Kanpur Khufia series that you're cooking up in your head?
So I think whenever I look back and I'm thinking of that one epiphany I had, and that one creative trigger I had to write any of my books, Priyanka. Honestly, it is these are all very in the moment and impulsive decisions. And the reason I wrote Kanpur Khufia Private Limited was I think it came at a confluence of the fact that I was born in Kanpur and there was a sense of familiarity, and there were these memories I always associated with Gualtoli, where incidentally my Nana and Nani used to stay. And of course, I love the genre. I credit my mama with it because I think when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, he showed me Evil Dead, and immediately after that, some thriller where somebody was being murdered. So even though my mom, really gave him a earful, I think it just caught, it just hooked me. And this whole sense of mystery and intrigue and this whole dread that builds up. So I at some point when I was visiting Kanpur, I merged the two, and I saw this board of this detective agency which was called what was the name? It was Foxy Detectives. It was written in in phonetic, and it had a fox right next to it, and it had the cutest logo. And I had this
So it's
crazy
for
laugh
real,
looking
right?
at
So it's
it.
for real then. I always used to
Yes.
think that these are probably some imaginary occupation or businesses that do not
No,
exist.
so I mean, so then I just started thinking that, imagine a detective who is, who's from Gualtoli, who is not the city slicker we normally assume. There's this imagery that comes to our minds immediately. And, there's this piece I recently wrote for the Hindu about, Western dominance in terms of, narratives about detectives and mystery, this
Hmm.
genre. And
Hmm.
that had me thinking that from the very beginning it's always been about a whole flood of literature that came to us when
The
convent schools
Sherlock
were
Holmes
around
of the
and the
world.
libraries were there,
Yeah.
the Agatha Christie's, the Nancy Drews, the Hardy Boys. And while for me the literature space has always been gender neutral as well as irrespective of where it comes from, uh, the truth of the matter is that we didn't consume as much of the local narratives and local stories as we could have, right? So I had
Hmm.
this huge influence at home because my father used to read many regional languages, and he used to get a lot of that literature home. But even I, I consumed the immediate fare that my sisters were, three elder sisters, and they used to keep on getting me these mystery books and all of that. So it's interesting that even Satyajit Ray said that he doffed his hat to Arthur Conan Doyle, and he said, "I have no qualms in admitting that that is it somehow became formulaic,
Hmm.
Sherlock Holmes, and then I think there was another August Dupin. It was written by Edgar Allan Poe. I think he was one of his earliest detectives he wrote about. And even if you look at Agatha Christie, it's always somehow when people are experimenting with the genre, they lean towards familiarity and
Yeah.
formulas of the genre, right? And that is what happened in India as well. And initially, when it was colonial times, it was about you know a, a police inspector possibly who isn't moving out too much from what is familiar and the structures that are
Hmm.
available and are freely available to us. And then later on, it became this really intelligent person, whether you're talking about Faluda or you're talking about Byomkesh Bakshi.
Bhumkesh Bakshi.
So whether it was Arthur Conan Doyle or whether it was Satyajit Ray or Sharadendu Upadhyay, I don't know where it came from, but I think it was a millie of I guess these influences that I wanted to create a character which who is not a city slicker, is very relatable, and he pretty much is he is born within this very conventional and traditional setup, yet he is very unconventional
Hmm.
in the way he behaves and the way he looks at society, the way he looks at the women around him, the way he just generally he's a simpleton at heart. So he is
Hmm.
this small town detective with big dreams. So that's something somehow caught my fancy during that trip. And this whole you grow up with a certain set of experiences, and at one point I guess
You
the
thought about.
idea might come to you over a period of time, but all these influences amalgamate and just suddenly make you feel that this is a story I need to pursue. And a lot of people ask me about why is it that Vidya Tripathi, who's his wife, is this constant character. Even when I was pitching it to my publishers, they kept saying, you talk about one central protagonist, why is Vidya Tripathi always in the picture? Because I said, they're so symbiotic in the way they are, and they complement each other, that for me she's an integral part of this whole detective series as well. So this
Hmm.
is something that continued. And even though I wrote another book which was a family drama, and it was a comedic story about a mom and a daughter called Excess Baggage.
Excess
Immediately
baggage.
after Kanpur Khufia, I somehow felt I had unfinished business with the Tripathi family, because those characters had become really dear to me. And in fact, I wasn't prescient enough to think that I was writing a series at the time, because I
Hmm.
was trying to combine a comedic genre with thriller, and these are two very contrasting and incongruous emotions. One is
Hmm.
comedic relief and the other is mystery and dread and fear. So I was just experimenting, and
Right.
somehow I guess the characters were loved. And uh, again, it was an experiment, because I've written about Kanpur Khufia and I'm taking it to another place altogether.
Hmm.
Agatha Christie could have done it because she was seasoned, and many others have done it, but it was hard for me. But let's just
Hmm.
say it was another challenge, and I've again always been fascinated with palaces and ruins, because they're
Hmm.
symbolic of so much more, this. So
Yeah.
I
And the
decided to take
name
this
also has
further
a
to it.
ring to it, this Kuldhara.
Yeah,
Kuldhara or Kuldhara, I don't know. I mean, it
yeah,
sounds very
Kuldhara. So it's one of the most
eerie.
haunted places in
Yes.
India.
Okay.
And yeah, more than the paranormal, what I did was I've used the paranormal as a setting,
Hmm.
but it's more about how whether it's ruins, whether it's any aspect of history, it's so open to interpretation.
Hmm.
They're vestiges of the past, and they're
Correct.
standing, and then you can make, because there are people who there are locals who say, oh, there's nothing of the sort, people have just manufactured this for tourism. Then there are others who said they've got grandfathers and grandmothers, great grandfathers and
Hmm.
mothers who have lived through it, and they tell you, what is the future, what happened to this entire tribe that disappeared overnight.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of
The
conjecture.
mystery.
But
Yeah.
what I find fascinating is that I can still fictionalize it, take an element of the story, and just use it to create that sense of mystery. So
Right.
that's why it was challenging, but it was interesting.
So you started with writing like normal slice of life, what to expect when what not to expect when you expect, and maybe a pinch of family drama in excess baggage, and some romance that you have written with Ranveer, with
Ravinder Singh.
Ravinder Singh. And so you started with more of the slice of life and romance kind of writing, and then you moved to mystery as a genre, mystery and detective, and uh, I don't know, spooky, eerie, horror, uh,
Yeah,
like an
so
amalgamation of all these, and you moved to it. So do you find like writing romance and slice of life like more easy, relatable journey to start with? Like when you're starting out to write fiction, did you find that to be like a easier entry into the whole fiction world as compared to writing a mystery, for example? So how was that
It's true.
experience?
So when I started writing my first book, this was I didn't expect to be expecting, and I think I was just so irritated with this book being thrust in my face when I was pregnant. I think it was my doctor Spock or somebody, and said, "You must read this." And so me being trying to be intellectual about it, saying, "Hey, let me write a long labored title, which will be I didn't expect to be expecting, which nobody could remember." They didn't know where to stock it because it landed up in the pregnancy section, by the way, the self
Yes,
help section. When I
yes.
went to the bookstores, I said, "Bhaiya, why are you keeping it there?" He said, "नहीं, वो pregnancy का book." I said, "No, it's not a
It's a
pregnancy book."
fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, when you're starting out, you obviously, and especially when I started out, I had no grand ambitions. There was no one point when I said, "I must write this book." I was in my maternity break. And I just realized that there was so much easy fodder available around me that the lowest hanging fruit was what was happening around me. And
Mm.
I made it quite autobiographical. I think a lot
Mm.
of people in my life objected to this as to why I had done it, especially my husband, because I think his boss called him back when he picked up the book at the airport and read it. In the end of that flight, he said, "Ban, I know too much about you. I wish I didn't." So, so it was, I was reaching out around me. So that was the first book, and I was experimenting.
Mm.
Incidentally, Excess Baggage was my third book. So I decided to challenge myself with the second book itself. So because a lot of people ask me, how is it you decide your tone of writing and your voice? I think it was, I think I finally found out after experimenting with various formats. I've written short stories. I used to write a lot of poetry earlier. And what I realized was that while a writer has many different voices and thought processes, and they can write across formats, there will be a few they gravitate towards, and
Mm.
they are good at naturally. And
Mm.
that is something that you must pay attention to, because I still write articles about, I write for a lot of women's websites. I'm still writing a lot of serious stuff here and there. But I realized that in long format, what works for me in long formats is something which is about a comedy of manner, a
Mm.
comedy of like PG Woodhouse's, kind of,
Mm.
because I was heavily influenced by British writers at the time, and Ruth Rendell, whether it's mystery or if it's PG Woodhouse. I just
Mm.
love it, just this acerbic wit, and
Mm.
just commenting about what is idiosyncrasies of the people around you and the world around you. So that always was very alluring for me. So I think that is something that found itself in my writing too. And then I toyed with the idea of just writing mystery, and then I just thought that this idea itself lends itself to so much of humor and earthiness, because the incongruity of setting this oily haired detective wearing bata chappals, and you're handing over your problems to somebody who looks like that, who doesn't look like a conventional detective. I thought it
Mm.
lent itself to humor.
Yeah. And I think
And
that's why it's also said, sorry, that's why it's also often said that don't take panga with a fiction writer because you never know, you might get featured in her book, in
oh,
his or her
always.
book
My in-laws
somehow.
have taken it to heart, and my father-in-law, he just keeps saying that if now it's come to a point where everything he utters to his friends during his adda sessions, he'll be like, "Don't say anything, my daughter-in-law will put you in a book." And I incidentally have put many embarrassing moments of specifically my mother-in-law in my books, so she's really wary. So
Yes.
that definitely happens. But to your question earlier about picking the genres, Priyanka, I honestly think I find sticking to one genre very tedious.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've defined, which is why, what I write, and which is why sometimes people at LitFest organizer get confused. They don't know which panel to put me on
Mm.
because, there's comedy, now there's a bit of horror, there's mystery, there's a little bit of romance. So you can say that I've made a khichdi of my brand, but I don't look at it that way, because
Mm.
I honestly think that comedy has a, and a satire and humor has a space in every kind of
Every kind
story.
of item.
It
Yeah.
depends on the quantum, it depends on the judiciousness with which you're using it. And I think it's nobody's child because it's omnipresent, but it's not in your face, right? You won't find
Hmm.
a lot of names when you talk about he's a satirist or he's a comedy writer. You won't find that, but humor is everywhere. So
Yeah.
I choose to, while not making it a focus, it is always a bedrock of how I write. And that is why I meander around different genres and I keep mixing because it's what keeps the writing interesting. So while I know that writing all kinds of fare confuse the readers because it's just like going to a brand, right? The purists wouldn't consider a writer a brand, but essentially people buy into a personality
Yeah.
as much as they buy into a writing, right? So if I go to a familiar brand, I know what to expect. The booksellers know what to stock because they know those people are going to come and ask for this particular writer. So it's essential to write with a certain level of predictability. And for me, I think my writing style is what does it for me. So while
Hmm.
I, meander around genres, the writing style is comedic. So
Yeah,
that's what
there
I've kind of kept to
yeah,
till
there
now.
is sometimes an increased obsession to be consistent and to be have a similar voice. But I think that sometimes that over insistence of being the brand you are, or trying to always stick to that image that you want to build as a writer, is can get a bit tedious, right? So often it is good for the readers also to be surprised, and that is
Yes,
not the case with many writers these days. I don't know if it helps from a marketing standpoint or to be in the literature fest panels, but for a reader I think it's always good to be surprised. I mean, you get what you get what you didn't expect. So
yes.
that's how I look at it. Tell me, how has been your journey of writing novels and also kind of thinking about it from a screen perspective? And do you see that as like the most emerging or the lucrative bait these days for the authors? Although I hate to say that, but then it is hard to sustain as an author, right? You have been an advertising
Absolutely.
professional, you have been in the corporate, and I have been trying to run a community for like over 10, 15 years, but then it is always hard to do things in this field because the money is hard to see, the royalties are always, I don't know, dwindling or mostly absent for new authors. How do you sustain this whole passion for stories, and how do you continue doing it when you
So,
always had different options, right? Like,
yes. There's this romantic notion that is associated with writing. And obviously, our society, our culture, the Urdu greats and the people who used to write, in those mehfils. So people have this association of writers being, these penniless poor people, who are unkempt, haven't bathed for a while and carry jholas around.
or really
And,
privileged who don't have
or
to
very privileged,
lift a
yeah. So there's
finger for
nothing
living.
exactly. So I feel as if I represent the middle class of writers in the new. Call me, sometimes I am referred to as this class of. It's called pulp fiction. It's called in a, I guess in
Articulate.
economic terms, it would be the bourgeois, right? But it's not that. And I honestly have no pretensions when it comes to literature because I honestly feel that uh, people like Chetan Bhagat, people like Ashwin Sangeet, Amish Tripathi, they write across genres, but I think they have opened up the market.
Hmm.
If literature is truly meant to be a diverse, inclusive space, then there should be no pretensions. Nobody's shoving books down your throat. There
Hmm.
is a kind of reader for every kind of book. And I personally feel just like on the on screen, even on books. Yes, there
Hmm.
are certain books, certain writing styles which I haven't enjoyed, and I've finished those books faster. But I think every single piece of work comes from a body of experience, and it's an individual viewpoint and it's okay to consume it, it's okay to like it, to not like it, right? Recently somebody just wrote to me telling me that they found these problems with the work and all, and I said absolutely fine, it's so subjective, everybody's not going to like what you write. But the reason I'm mentioning these people is because they made this entire writing world accessible to a lot of people like us.
Hmm.
There used to be times when I used to attend literature fests And even as a kid, when I used to go along with my father, there were no literature fests. Whenever we met people and the
Mm.
people who write, it was with this aura of, oh my God, there's this deification, because it's an inaccessible world. You might
Yes,
have all the
yes,
ambitions and you might have been wanting to write and you might be the most excellent writer on earth, but there were no opportunities.
correct.
And this incidentally made me remember some article of yours I was actually reading about how men think and how women think in terms of startups. And I found that very interesting because it's a thought process. It isn't just about what society will allow you, it is your mental machinations of what you will allow yourself.
Yeah.
So, to compound so already you have no options. Then on top of that, to compound the fact that, look, I've been in this job forever. I'm a woman. I'm heading towards something else. Why should I sidestep and screw my life over, right?
Mm.
Let's just continue with what I'm doing. But the great part also is that there's this whole content writing industry, the novel writing industry, with a whole bunch of women writers coming to the fore, whether it's thrillers, whether it's
Mm.
mythological fiction, whether it's historical fiction. There's a lot of, and this is one western trend which I really appreciate, that they
Mm.
opened up the market for women writers,
Mm.
and incidentally that is what percolated down here as well. And
Mm.
there was a lot of writers like Chitrabi Devkarni and Jhumpa Lahiri and
Yeah.
Taslima Nassim, all of them opened up the market for women writers because they publishers realized there is a market. There's no
Mm.
need for it's silly sounding pseudonyms,
Mm.
so they can write under their own
Own
names, and
names.
there's a
Yeah.
market. So I think I am extremely privileged because I am born in a time where, yes, there are certain gender dynamics which will always be at play within every industry, and this is nothing only to do with publishing.
Mm.
But as long as you have a good story to tell and you have people who understand what you're trying to communicate and what you're trying to write, and that you have an idea of the kind of reader you're looking at, there will be publishers. Of course, the state of the industry is not great right now. Every single
Mm.
workshop I take, I make it a point to communicate to people saying that this is don't mix the passion with pragmatism.
Yes.
Writing is all about passion. But if you walk up to your parents and just say, "Oh my God, I'm quitting my job today. Will you support me?" I'm like, "No one will do it, right?"
Yes.
Because there are, I think, 80% of the writers who I know, friends, they have very, I guess, lucrative day jobs as well. Because,
Yeah.
like you said, it is not easy. Therein comes an option of screen. Many people have come and asked me saying, how is it that you're okay with your stories being absolutely changed for
Mm.
screen and mold, and the basic ethos of it is gone. I again say that I have been in the advertising industry. I know the film world. I know what happens behind the camera. And I know behind the camera, there are about 150 people between me, my book being sold, and it getting to the screen. And they
Screen.
all have their creative vision. And
Yeah.
there is a language on screen which is very different from a book.
Script. Yeah.
So there are people who write screenplays as well, and they do the whole transition between the writing the book and screenplay. But if they've been part of the industry, so I am officially now part of the Screenwriters Association, because I'm trying to write for screen and pitching concepts directly for OTT. But having said that, I have no qualms in people coming and buying my stories, because I know my forte is these massy
Mm.
these stories which are set in various social milieus across India. And that is and I love writing about relationships and cross dynamics and
Mm.
various people. So I think there is something, they see a certain potential in these stories, and they can buy my stories. I would like to think that it wouldn't absolutely change face and figure and form to a format and a story and a narrative which is unrecognizable to me. But I tend to think that they've bought it because there are certain pillars and a premise which they have appreciated, and as long as they stick with that, be happy to see what their vision is, because two of
Mm.
my books, on excess baggage, is going to be a movie, and Kanpur Khufia is going to be a web series. So I recently heard about that how episodic it's becoming. So already I was hyperventilating a bit, saying, okay, what about the mysteries? Like, we've deepened the mystery a bit. I was like, what do you mean by deepened? And then I said, it's all right, let them do what they need to do with it, and then I'll be watching eagerly and seeing. So yes, it is a lucrative option. You don't even need to in fact wait for a book. So my fifth book, which I've finished writing the draft of, the first draft is horrendous, as we all know. So I finished that, but I'm pitching it directly, for
Okay.
a web series, because there is potential in these stories. It is a lucrative avenue, so why not?
Mm.
I know that books aren't selling as much. People keep saying books are dying, but I personally believe whether it comes to fashion, whether it comes to books or genres, everything is cyclical. And I
Mm.
refuse to believe that stories are going to die. The
Yeah.
formats might change, the consumption patterns might change, but stories are going to be consumed. So you just have to be smart and keep growing and changing and evolving with the times. So, and yeah, don't leave your day jobs till you know for sure that you're gonna make some money and you've sold at least 10 books for screen.
Yes, very well said. But did you really imagine your journey to be like this when you started out? Like you said that I started with no expectation. And do you have certain milestones or goals moving forward now that you have kind of raised the bar for yourself by writing and writing for screen or directly pitching to the screen? Have you set yourself up for some newer goals in your life, and what do you see next for yourself?
Anything to do with my career, Priyanka, my new career, I would say that I'm constantly in a state of my mind is blown because I had no expectations. I am the easiest person to please even when it comes to myself because I had imagined none of this. So if I were to look back at the last 4.5 years, I had no idea. I didn't even know that I would find a publisher. That was also uh, you know, a, a chance meeting, the fact that I wrote a story which I was never going to. I came in the top 10 for some Times of India, writing contest, which was, had these prompts, and Ravinder Singh was part of it. The fact that I even made, I made contact with him and I made this, really cringy face and I said, I heard you have a publication house. I was prepared for none of it. So I gave the worst elevator pitch possible. And then he said, HarperCollins is coming on board. And I mean, from somebody who has absolutely no ambitions to publish or any dreams of that nature, to be told that you're being taken on by HarperCollins, to the fact that I'm writing my fifth book, to the point that factoring in that it's going to bigger screens, all the love, all the conversations, the networking, the fact that I feel like I'm part of this kindred, set of people, you, all the authors, so many people, the readers, it's beyond what I could ever have imagined. And if I keep surprising myself, I don't need to do it. I'm a firm believer in destiny, and I just feel that if you're fueling yourself towards your destiny, then keep surprising me. I will be the happiest customer. And yeah,
Amazing,
so,
amazing. I
yeah.
love hearing such words of gratitude, and I think that really that's really very, very valuable, and we often don't value this whole idea of gratitude and being thankful for what we already have and what we have achieved. And I mean, amazing. And last question from my side would be, how does your bookshelf look like? Because I'm always very curious to know the kind of books that the author is reading, because a lot of those inputs, I'm sure, gets somehow marinated into your writing. So,
Absolutely.
what are some
So
of your favorite books?
they don't look pretty, I must tell you. There's one bookshelf in every room. Now I've created my own personal 8-year-old monster in terms of books, so her books are oozing. So my husband, who loves arranging everything in order, he comes back home, first thing he'll do, he'll just rush about putting books in place because there's a flood everywhere. And I think I have my own family to thank for my eclectic taste and the fact that I get bored very easily. So if I'm reading a particular genre, I will immediately switch and I keep on changing. Because my father, on one hand, used to talk to me about the Upanishads. My sister brought Georgette Eyre to me and Kamala Das, which my mother found out later and she confiscated that particular book because there's a very raunchy piece in there. Then my other sister got me these Huckleberry Finn and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and it was crazy, the kind of the variety of books that I consumed, and I think that's continued. I have made so some of my favorites. I always get tongue tied whenever I'm asked about favorite books and authors because there's a sea of them and it's very difficult to focus on one part and pull out names. But Rabindranath Tagore, Munshi Premchand, Margaret Atwood, Georgette Eyre, P.G. Woodhouse, recently Anthony Doerr. I love all his work. Um, I've what I've done is there's so many names. In the last 2 years, I've made a special effort to pick Indian authors and regional work and a lot of
Mm.
translated work, which is so rich and so fantastic. And it particularly inspires me because I
Mm-hmm.
am also trying to write about various pockets of India. And a writer is always an empath, and being able to put yourself in shoes,
Yeah.
of maybe somebody who's sitting in the pandemic. I just read this lovely book by Namita Gokhale called The Blind Matriarch. I personally was told myself that I'm done with reading stories about the pandemic. It was making me baff. I couldn't do it anymore. Yet, because of the wonderful way she's written that story, it was just a simple story of about family caught in in a building during the pandemic. And then, of course, I reached out to a Roots Rental immediately after that. I'm reading the latest book of Education of Yuri by Jerry Pinto.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, I am also, there are always two books in my, next to my bed. So while I'm reading Education of Yuri, I'm also reading Mahasamar, which is a basic interpretation of the Mahabharata. So it's as crazy as that, and there's always these conflicting narratives, and it's just it stimulates the way I think, the way I am a person, and the way I write. So yes,
Amazing.
without my books I'm nothing.
Amazing. So that does give a very in-depth picture or an in-depth peek into the mind of Richa Mukherjee and her world. So thank you so much for talking to me and for opening your heart and your mind to us and telling us all that goes into making this beautiful work of fiction. And I wish
Thank
you
you
all the
so much, and
best.
I've sorry, thank you so much. And while you were speaking, I was trying to read the titles in your bookshelf as well, but it's too
Okay,
far.
yeah, it's a bit far. I don't get
Yeah,
as many hardcover books here in Germany, so
I
I
can
I need to
imagine.
live with Kindle most of the time. So yes, so thank you so much, and I wish you all the best, and congratulations once again for all
Thank
that you
you.
have achieved so far, and way to go.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Have a nice day.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Priyanka.